Thank you, everyone. And it's my pleasure to introduce Joni and Francois. If you're at the session looking at digital identity, you're at the right one. So that's a good thing. Uh-oh. Sorry, that was the lag. Anyway, apologies, that was me. I want to introduce our two speakers. Joni Brennan is the president of the Digital ID and Authentication Council of Canada, and she's been building over 15 years of hands-on experience with digital identity innovations and standards development. Francois has 25 years of experience consulting with digital media and is a senior advisor with a focus on innovation and digital identity. So I'm going to turn it over with no further ado to them, and we're going to explore the whole concept of digital identity in Canada. Over to you, Joni and Francois. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Thank you for the invitation to speak today. Certainly, it's an important topic for Canada, digital identity. Certainly, digital identity is an important topic for organizations like ISACA, who are focused on verification of security and information security. So we think we have an interesting presentation for you today. We will go through a bit of an overview of the ecosystem, then we'll talk a bit about some of the certification program that we have coming forward. A little bit about me. I'm coming to you today based in Vancouver in British Columbia. So I'm excited to join from this side of Canada. My bio is a little out of date. I've been working in this space for almost 20 years now, and really in the nonprofit sector and working across public and private sector organizations who are all bringing together their priorities around the way forward for digital identity. And so what we'll focus on a bit today is what this means for Canada, what it means in the global context, and in a cyber and information security risk management perspective. So it's really nice to meet everyone. I will hand off to Francois, who will do a first part of the presentation today en français, and I will conclude our presentation today in English. So Francois, over to you to take it away.
Merci, Joni. Bonjour à tout le monde. Je suis François Bédard, donc j'agis au nom du CIAN, donc qui est la version francophone de DIAC. Donc, je vous parle directement de Montréal, donc je suis sur la côte Est. J'amène 25 ans d'expertise en innovation et en modèle d'affaires, mais particulièrement dans ce qui nous concerne au niveau de l'identité numérique. Je collabore avec DIAC depuis plus de 2 ans, avec Joni qui est sur la côte Ouest et la côte Est. On est vraiment alignés sur beaucoup de trucs. Et le Québec fait des choses extraordinaires à ce moment-ci, mais ça, on pourra en parler un petit peu plus tard au niveau du Q&A. Alors, Joni, on peut avancer sur le slide. Donc, pour vous parler un petit peu de ce que DIAC est ou de ce que le CIAN est, donc notre histoire. Donc, on a été créé, ça fait quasiment 10 ans, donc à la demande du fédéral suite au scandale banquier de 2008. Donc, le CIAN veut dire c'est un accélérateur d'adoption qui se spécialise aussi sur l'identité numérique, l'adoption. Donc, on informe ceux qui prennent des décisions au niveau des stratégies et des tactiques. Donc, on est extrêmement actif. On est organisé à but non lucratif aussi. Donc, le CIAN est un fournisseur de cadres de confiance, ce qu'on appelle en anglais un Third Party Advisory Group. On est aussi, donc, on développe un cadre de confiance, un cadre d'assurance, puis on appelle ça le PCTF en anglais, qui veut dire le Pan-Canadian Trust Framework. Donc, on s'assure que l'information est à jour, aussi que l'écosystème est conforme, parce qu'au-delà de l'ensemble des standards, il y a beaucoup de choses qui doivent se mixer ensemble. On adore les carrés de sable, on adore les puzzles, donc on fait de l'arrimage entre les normes, les politiques et la gouvernance, les technologies, puis aussi les individus, les personnes, les humains, que ce soit public ou privé. Cet écosystème-là est extrêmement riche et j'arrive de l'Europe où j'ai eu la chance de présenter un panel sur l'identité numérique et même l'Europe regarde beaucoup le Canada au niveau de son agilité parce qu'on est extrêmement intégré et on a vraiment un écosystème public-privé. Dans le leadership de DIAC et de SIAN, on a des grands noms aussi. On est extrêmement privilégiés. Je ne dirais pas que suite à la pandémie, il y a eu de plus en plus de membres, que ce soit Interac, les provinces, la Colombie-Britannique, l'Ontario, le Québec, TELUS. On a un conseil d'administration qui est extrêmement proactif et aussi très humain, très passionné pour amener du sens à tout ça, parce que ça peut être compliqué. L'identité numérique, ça veut dire quoi? Donc, on a des gens extrêmement proactifs. On est extrêmement privilégié d'être au cœur de cette dynamique-là. Prochaine slide. Pour essayer d'avoir une espèce de un maximum de joueurs. Donc, ce qui est extrêmement important aussi, c'est cette habileté de mixer les individus et les organisations. Et donc, ultimement, l'identité numérique peut être applicable à quoi? Parce que c'est un concept qui est peut-être un petit peu galvaudé, mais à terme, on sait que ça va passer par un portefeuille numérique. Mais pour certains secteurs extrêmement stratégiques comme la finance et le commerce, comment on peut être plus résilient, plus efficace, réduire la fraude, parce que c'est dans ce créneau-là aussi que les gouvernements ont un enjeu super important, parce que quand les gouvernements peuvent authentifier qui est François versus Johnny, ma conjointe et mes 3 enfants, il y a comme une résilience opérationnelle qui peut se faire. Donc, le public a un secteur extrêmement important et donc, on parle de services gouvernementaux. Puis, ce qui est un petit peu triste et en même temps un petit peu satisfaisant, c'est que des fois, il faut des grands phénomènes sociétals comme le COVID pour être capable de réaliser qu'on peut être beaucoup plus efficient, beaucoup plus productif et beaucoup plus résilient. Ce qui amène aussi des attentes au niveau citoyen, parce que le citoyen aussi fait partie de cet écosystème-là, pour valoriser autant la diversité que l'inclusion, donc la capacité d'authentifier des citoyens. Et donc, dans ce cas-là aussi, de s'assurer que les gens peuvent recevoir l'ensemble des services qui viennent à ça, donc assurer que j'existe dans un système. Donc, je suis un individu, pas juste un numéro, mais aussi d'énormes bénéfices au secteur de la santé. Je pense que ça a été une grande leçon sur comment on est capable d'être résilient, comment on est capable d'être efficace pour venir en aide aux gens qui en avaient vraiment besoin. Donc, c'est clair que c'est des grands secteurs qui amenaient beaucoup de transformations, mais aussi beaucoup de leçons. Et le Canada a un grand leadership en ce moment et même à la limite une influence internationale, autant sur l'Europe qu'autant sur les États-Unis. Prochaine slide. Et donc, qu'est-ce que c'est que l'identité numérique? L'identité numérique, c'est plusieurs éléments qu'on peut regrouper. Tu peux aller sur les autres slides, Johnny. Donc, c'est aussi une capacité d'authentifier, d'organiser, de vérifier, de s'assurer qu'on a aussi des avis et des consentements. C'est aussi beaucoup d'infrastructures technologiques. Là, on parle de gouvernance, d'imputabilité, d'opérationnalisation. Et donc, ça implique plusieurs joueurs en même temps qui ont tous un rôle dans cette chaîne de valeur-là pour assurer l'identité numérique. Donc, ce qui est très important, c'est vraiment un nouveau partenariat public-privé et un écosystème qui doit être résilient d'un point de vue technologique, dans lequel il y aura des outils. En Europe, on parlait d'un wallet, mais au Canada, on va parler d'un portefeuille numérique et ça devient le livrable fondamentalement. Mais il faut aussi que les solutions soient bien alignées dans un cadre réglementaire. Le Québec fait des choses extraordinaires en ce moment, puis aussi le fédéral fait partie du truc. Donc, c'est énormément d'éléments qui se conjuguent en même temps. Puis notre rôle chez DIAC, c'est d'essayer de synchroniser l'ensemble de ces conversations-là, challenger aussi ce qui peut venir par la suite, mais en regroupant l'ensemble de ce secteur-là parce qu'il y a énormément de standards, mais il y a aussi beaucoup de choses qui vont plus vite. Et donc, de la connectivité, puis des jumeaux numériques et même jusqu'au portefeuille numérique qui se joue sur un téléphone mobile de plus en plus. Prochaine slide. Donc, la grande question aussi, c'est qu'est-ce que pensent les Canadiens de l'identité numérique? Quelles sont les perceptions, quelles sont les attentes? Donc, ce que pensent les Canadiens au niveau de l'identité numérique, c'est assez simple. 4 Canadiens sur 5 croient que c'est très et assez important que nos gouvernements fédéraux et fédéral et provinciaux agissent de façon très vite. Grande leçon de la pandémie, entre autres, mais aussi grande leçon sur peut-être trop d'années à investir en technologie, puis ultimement, comment est-ce qu'on peut être capable d'être plus efficace et plus résilient? 2 tiers trouvent que la collaboration entre le secteur public et privé est essentielle. J'ai même fait une intervention la semaine dernière, il y a 2 semaines, à Lille, au nord de France. Dans leur cas, on parlait des Jeux olympiques de 2024. C'est impossible que l'État fonctionne seul. Il faut qu'il s'implique aussi avec le secteur privé, mais c'est ensemble que ces choses-là peuvent être réglées. Donc, 2 tiers pensent aussi qu'avec la pandémie, ça va encore beaucoup plus vite parce qu'ultimement, ce sont des nouveaux services et il ne faut pas oublier aussi qu'il faut penser à cette forme aussi d'inclusion et de diversité. Ce n'est pas tout le monde qui a un téléphone numérique aussi, mais il faut être capable d'y aller de façon multigénérationnelle. Donc, il y a énormément d'attentes et énormément d'attentes aussi par le secteur public qui doit avoir ce cadre de confiance-là qui est réplicable et duplicable de province en province. Prochaine slide. Et donc, quand on parlait de multigénération, moi-même, je suis un parent d'enfant, mais j'ai été aussi un enfant d'un parent. Donc, 8 parents et plus aidants sur 10 dont se sont montrés les plus intéressés parce que cette nouvelle génération-là va comprendre qu'on est capable d'aller encore plus vite. 8 Canadiens sur 10 sont aussi assez très favorables au principe d'identité. On n'est plus dans le Big Brother, on est dans l'efficience opérationnelle, on est dans la responsabilité du secteur public parce que ce sont eux aussi qui contrôlent une partie de notre identité. Permis de conduire, assurance maladie, mes diplômes, mon état civil, il n'y a que le public qui peut être capable de le déceler, de le rendre accessible, et c'est là que le secteur privé peut embarquer. Près de la moitié aussi sont d'accord pour dire que les passeports délivrés par le gouvernement cadrent avec la propre définition de l'identité numérique. Il n'y a qu'un gouvernement qui peut énoncer et qui peut approuver un passeport, mais un passeport, c'est un des éléments qui rentre dans mon portefeuille numérique. Et c'est à moi aussi de gérer à travers les outils dont je possède. Prochain écran, prochaine slide.
There we go.
Ce que pensent aussi les Canadiens sur l'identité numérique, c'est que, donc tu peux, you can go on the slide, Johnny. Ils pensent aussi qu'il devrait y avoir un accès aux données personnelles recueillies sur ce sujet. Donc, ça veut dire quoi? C'est que les attentes sont extrêmement grandes. Et comme on peut le voir, on s'attend à ce que le gouvernement puisse libérer cette information-là. Donc, au niveau fédéral, les attentes sont à 91 au niveau des provinces, c'est 91 aussi. Mais le secteur privé va arriver à 86 parce qu'ultimement, tant et aussi longtemps que le public ne peut pas autoriser ou authentifier qui existe ou pas dans le système, que ce soit François, Johnny ou ma conjointe Anouk, mes 3 enfants, le secteur privé va suivre par la suite. Mais le secteur privé a un avantage, il veut faire du meilleur commerce. Tandis que les énonceurs d'identité qui sont publics, eux veulent trouver de l'efficience opérationnelle et rendre des meilleurs services aux citoyens. Prochaine slide.
Francois, sorry for interrupting, but we're just being asked if there's this is a French session and I just want to somebody missed the clarification at the front. So Joni or Francois, if you want to.
No worries. Francois has 2 more slides. We're flipping to English then. And for the meeting attendees, we will provide you both slide sets in both English and French.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Sur ce que pensent les Canadiens sur l'identité numérique, donc, il y a énormément d'attentes, il y a énormément de projections que ça doit faire. Et ça va souvent être porté par la technologie elle-même. On peut comprendre ce que Apple est en train de faire avec son wallet, avec d'autres spécialistes qui arrivent avec leur propre wallet aussi. Et ultimement, bien, ça devient transactionnel, tout ça. Et dans la démographie, dans les personas, il y a aussi des générations qui sont beaucoup plus proches à l'utiliser. Donc, on parle de la génération sandwich. Je suis dans la génération sandwich. Je prends soin de parents comme je suis un parent d'enfant. Et donc, il y a énormément d'attentes à ce que ça aille un petit peu plus vite. Donc, 4 sur 10 utilisent déjà un portefeuille numérique sur un téléphone intelligent et l'Apple Wallet est celui qui est le plus répandu pour l'instant. Mais il faut se projeter aussi avec ce qui va s'en venir, entre autres avec l'Open Banking au Canada dans les prochains mois. Prochaine slide. Et pourtant, sur Internet, je peux décider aussi qui je suis. Donc, j'adore cette slide-là, and I'm going to switch in English also because digital identity is more than a login, but also how do I manage my own identity? So I could be a dog, I could be a cat, but by the way, I will never receive the benefit of this identity. So to keep stuff in perspective, even though we have the metaverse who wants to redominate the world, but also don't forget, this is also the private sector is trying to come with a new 3D virtual world. So what is fundamental is managing identity is a public-private initiative, and there's benefits that goes with it. And this is exactly what DAC has been doing by trying to elevate, but also to have a federated approach about the solutions who are citizen-centric, and even digital identity of things eventually. So Joni, this is for you now.
Perfect. So, and for our organizer, do you see now the English? Do you see the slides? I hope so. In this case, so I've just flipped to the English slide, so this may be more understandable for the audience. So perfect, and thank you, Francois. So everything you saw will provide in both English and French, and available for both audiences. And so yeah, this is a famous cartoon back in 1993 on the internet. No one knows you're a dog, and still we're in this ecosystem today. Where it's more than a login, and even though you're logging in, you don't know what's behind this login. So we'll talk a little bit about Francois shared statistics from some reports that we've done on marketplace research. What you saw in terms of the preferences of Canadians, 2/3 believing the pandemic makes it more important, digital identity more important, 2/3 wanting the public sector and the private sector to collaborate. This is all available in our digital identity research on diac.ca, and this is also all available in English and French, so you can download the full report if you like to go into those statistics. Now, let's talk a little bit more about the models and the ecosystem and the scenario. And so from a scenario perspective, we take our dog and we move them into some scenarios for how digital identity is today and how it may develop going forward. And the first scenario is around platform identity. And so in the first scenario, the end users, the people who are using services and solutions online, they still have limited visibility on what information is held about them or how that information is used. And so in the platform scenario, where it's still even further invested in the big giants, the Google, the Apple, the Facebook, Amazon. And in this scenario, there's little influence that can be necessarily imposed. And in this scenario on the internet, still no one knows that you're a dog behind the computer screen. Now, moving forward, we have operator networks. And so from an operator network perspective, they may not work everywhere, but they work when it matters most. And if we think about our operator networks, you're all already familiar with these today. You're using them. If you're using credit cards, if you're using our payment system, our electronic payment system, our payment network, you're using a trusted operator network. If you're using your mobile telephone, it's happening over a trusted network. Trusted operator networks are networks where we have from a security perspective, a strong front door. This means there are procedures and policies and agreements and verifications that need to happen before an organization participates in this strong front door. They have to prove certifications and verifications, and there's a lot of control in this ecosystem. Now, again, it may not work in every scenario, but it works in often high security scenarios, high value transaction scenarios. And in this case, how can you be a dog if you've got a bank account and a mobile phone? So we see this today in terms of digital identity, and we think we'll see this going forward as well. The next model is a bit of a newer model, and this is the self-sovereign identity model. And this
Joni,
is, yes.
Sorry, one last. So the builds, there's a lag. So
we'll just build them all. That's okay.
Maybe I was going to suggest put it all up because it takes
we'll build
a while.
them all. You bet. Thanks, everyone. So in the self-sovereign identity model, it's very distributed. And so this is a model around some of the technologies that have come up through blockchain, distributed ledger technology. This is the space that's really moving into developing digital wallets. And one of the slides Francois was presenting earlier was around 91% of Canadians want to know what information exists about them in the public sector, federal and provincial, and they want to know the same about the information in the private sector. Well, in the self-sovereign ecosystem, there's a little bit more of perhaps an ability to make use of these types of information through something like a digital wallet as well. So in this case, though, however, users will need to look after their data a lot like they have to look after their money. They need to make sure that it is protected. They're using good solutions, and so there is value there, and they will have to pay more attention to that space. And in this case, on the internet, maybe you actually can prove you're a dog if you have the right proof in your digital wallet. And then we have open APIs. And so open APIs are out there today. They exist. They will continue to evolve and develop. And so from an open API perspective, a lot of individuals make connections individually to different services and where they're transacting. A lot of connections are made. Most of the time, individuals don't remember which connections they make for data to flow through one API or another. So they don't remember where those connections are set up or where they're happening or if they've approved them. And so that can get quite complex. So this exists in the space today, and it will likely exist going forward. And in this case, it's we don't know if you're a dog, but we can see that you like doggy treats. And so a lot of information is getting pulled in, and then some assumptions around digital identity are being made. So these are the 4 scenarios that are existing today. And in our view, from a DIAC perspective, they will continue to exist for the next 3 to 5 years over time. We may see more movement toward one or the other, more adoption toward one or the other, but they exist today and they will exist going forward. So it's good to understand these as your basis and your model when you're thinking about how digital identity, how data, how security, how information security verification needs to be applied in different types of scenarios and different types of models. So we'll talk a bit about, in terms of the scenarios, there are some common challenges that exist across each of them. And those common challenges come down to really 2 areas of focus. One being creating the right market conditions, creating market conditions to enable that growth, and 2, promoting that market growth within that ecosystem. And so from a creating market conditions perspective, 2 of the challenges that we see, one is around standards. In the digital identity space, there are many standards, many standards. And so we have industry standards, national standards, international standards. Some of those standards are policy and process based. Other standards are focused particularly on technology. We have organizations like the World Wide Web Consortium, and sitting alongside organizations like the Internet Engineering Task Force and ITUT or ISO, for example. And so this is, it's great that there is so much work, but also economic sector-wide adoption is unclear because there are so many ways of so many standards in the space, and maybe that's appropriate as well because there are so many scenarios that we discuss. So the standard space can be a challenge given its complexity and where it's moving. The next area under creating market conditions is the regulatory area. And what we see in Canada is that regulations today do not enable the empowerment needed necessarily to enable digital identity solutions. And this includes controlled access to data. So the slide that Francois showed around the 91%, this 91% wanting to know what data exists and to control it. The policy path for this does not exist. The public policy path for this is limited as of today. We do have, of course, a lot of privacy regulation and privacy regulation modernization. However, this is often talking about data that's in the private sector, and this is not necessarily talking about data that is authoritative and data that would often be used to fulfill regulations like know your customer and anti-money laundering. And so, for example, verifiable data that sits, let's say, at the federal level within something like a passport or a permanent resident card, or data that sits at the provincial level in something like a driver's license or a health card, for example. So our policy is not in line with 2022 and going forward with making it very clear where and how the person, the subject, has control and authority over data to be able to use it in different scenarios and different systems. So clarification would be beneficial there. In terms of promoting the market growth, when we look at sustainability, particularly those 4 models that we showed, their responsibility around personal data exchange does need to be carefully examined. And so how will these systems and solutions sustain themselves? How will they have the funds to make sure that they can keep up with the security, with the management, with all the tools that are needed? And those models are quite different across those 4 scenarios that we showed. And so a review needs to be taken in terms of systems and how they operate for that sustainability and where that sustainability is coming from, because it may be different depending on the scenario, and that may influence the solution and how it's developed and implemented. And then promoting market growth as well, inclusion. It can be a challenge to have both critical mass adoption of the population and at the same time ensuring diversity, equitability, and inclusion in that ecosystem, and both must be achieved. And so work is going and will be ongoing in terms of ensuring that we have the most diversity pathways for diversity, equitability, and inclusion to grow within these ecosystems, while the mass adoption is necessary for these types of ecosystems to actually function and solve problems and challenges. So if we take a little bit of the landscape review, what's happening in the scenario perspective from a modeling ecosystem perspective, and what we see in terms of some of the ecosystem-based common challenges that are across those different scenarios. One thing that is needed are tools to verify assurance. And so these are governance, risk, and compliance tools to verify assurance across those scenarios and across those common scenarios and those common scenario challenges. So we'll look a little bit at the space of what these tools look like and what they are, where the differences are, and where the similarities are. And so we'll start with trust frameworks. And so we'll start with standards versus trust frameworks. And so in this tools for trust ecosystem, we have many standards, and we mentioned that earlier. Standards are typically documenting one way of doing something or one methodology. They are often rigid, specifically so, purposefully so, because they need to be they're trying to be generally accepted as the single agreed method for performing a task or for implementing a technology. So the rigidity is important there. Frameworks are at a different layer. They're a different kind of tool. You could interchange the word framework with scheme. It can also be called a scheme. And trust frameworks rely on focusing on achieving policy and regulatory outcomes. Trust frameworks define a system or systems. They're more ecosystem focused, and how pieces work or don't work together in the ecosystem and how much you can trust them in the ecosystem, versus defining the methodology itself. They don't do that. And trust frameworks are really schemes for to secure operational interoperability in complex ecosystems. Maybe I will have 3 different wallets. Maybe those wallets will be built with digital wallets. Maybe those wallets will be built with 3 different technologies. Maybe they will work on 3 different networks. However, having the ability to know that you can trust the implementation of wallet 1 versus wallet 2 versus wallet 3, that it has the security, it has the privacy, it has the accountability, all built into that wallet. We may have this is trust assurance. This is governance, risk, and compliance verification. While it may not actually mean that these wallets can talk to each other, it may mean that we can have data be portable from one wallet to another. That said, if all of the wallets in this example are on the same technology, we can also verify that they technologically interoperate as well. So this is really important in complex ecosystems, because in Canada, just as around the world, there are many more ways than one of solving these problems and working toward these opportunities. So frameworks really allow for that innovation and that ecosystem of different tools and solutions to be in the same ecosystem, while having the ability to measure trust, because risk has been mitigated, and we know the measurement of how much risk has been mitigated by the application of a trust framework. And trust frameworks are really tools that help us to answer questions. And so in our ecosystem, as we go forward, Francois showed a bit of the trust framework. I'll show it again as well, this time in English. And we have concepts around a person. I'm a verified person. What have my identities been checked? My credentials been checked? My driver's license, my passport. Can my bank also verify me? Same for Francois. Does he have a driver's license, a passport, a health card? Can his bank verify him? So the concepts of, can I trust this verified person? Can I trust the credential that they're showing us, the wallet or the network? Trust frameworks help to answer that question. And then they also help to answer, is my privacy protected when I'm using this wallet or this network? Or will I need more assurance around the security and the privacy, so that I know that risk is managed enough for this transaction that I want to perform? So this is what the trust frameworks provide in complex ecosystems. Now, this matters as we get into our framework. We need to be able to, if we have a proof like vaccine passport or vaccine verification, we need to be able to show that they're attached to a verified person, that that vaccine verification was issued by a verified organization, that it contains verified credential information that meets privacy and notice and consent requirements. And from a wallet perspective, if we're going into that direction, that wallet has to be designed with user centricity around people, be accessible to all Canadians, be interoperable, and also, again, protect the privacy and the security of the user. Now let's look at how this sits in more of an ecosystem place. So in the ecosystem, we have method definitional standards, and we have open source code that sit at the what we'll call the definitional layer. And so here you can have industry standards, national standards, international standards. You can also have open source code. And so you might have a OpenID Connect is a technical standard for a methodology of transporting information using a specification called Open Identity. You could have that sitting next to Hyperledger Indy, which is a stack of open source code that develops in the Linux Foundation. So these are definitional methods of how to build a function or build a task, and they sit at the bottom of the pyramid. Now that we've got our foundations of the how will we do these things? Well, we want to look at our risk compliance. And so we want to look at our governance, our risk and compliance, and how we're mitigating once these tools are put into low risk, mid risk, high risk scenarios. How do the people, processes, and business and the legal structures change around these tools to make sure that that risk is being mitigated in an information security perspective? And really what helps to define how you mitigate those risks is what use case will these tools be used in? What communities will these tools be used in? So they drive your risk profiles. And then you use your trust framework scheme to determine which profiles, what types of controls do you need, auditable governance, risk, and compliance controls that are being built on and are using particular method definitional standards and open source code. So that's how we sit as an ecosystem and how these pieces will fit together. To go back to our beginning, where we talked about the work that we do at DIAC, we focus on standards, technology, policy and governance, and of course, people. So from the standards perspective, that foundational element of the pyramid, that definitional element of the period, that's where different standards are sitting. That's where we're building and putting the governance, risk, compliance on top. What we see here today in terms of this GRC, governance, risk, compliance framework, is that it is technology neutral. And so it can be used across different technologies, and it can be used in different models, whether you're in different scenarios, whether you're in that trusted operator scenario, that big platform area, self-sovereign identity, or APIs. These are usable. The framework is usable. Trust frameworks are usable in those different contexts. They help to meet governance outcomes, policy and governance outcomes, and all designed around and for people, to build people's confidence in terms of adoption, and also to build businesses and governments' confidence in terms of adoption. So let's look a bit at the Pan-Canadian Trust Framework. This is the tool for verification, all available in English and in French. Francois showed earlier a slide that said, what is digital identity? And it had some components. It had some pieces, and those pieces are pieces that are replicated here. And so specifically, what is digital identity? Well, the digital identity is a collection of capabilities that, when put together, enable a person or an organization to verify themselves to perform a transaction. So at the basis here, we have the ability to verify who a person is. That's checking different credentials that may exist in paper form or plastic form today. The ability to verify an organization through their business registration, and to authenticate that person. And so we may use user IDs and passwords, a very low authentication, low method of authentication, or we may add in factors to two-factor authentication using passcodes and phones and things of that nature. So we need to authenticate people. people present in these ecosystems credentials, and these credentials really represent often a relationship or an attribute. So a credential, if I show a driver's license, that credential is showing that I have a relationship between myself and British Columbia, and an attribute about me is that I am able to drive. So credentials really represent both relationships and attributes. And our newest component coming into the space is the digital wallet. This framework is the first that I know of in the world to be a governance, risk, and compliance framework that has a component that focuses on digital wallets, which again is important because the standards are not settled in that space, in that ecosystem. We also focus on the infrastructure and the technology operations, and all of that is encompassed by and wrapped around privacy. So privacy is built into every piece of this framework. It's built into both each of the components in terms of how they are designed. It's built into authentication, credentials, digital wallet, in terms of how they're designed and how they're represented. And then there's also a privacy component that wraps around each of them. So this is a top priority, and the way that we've built this framework is recognizing and working with the policies and legislative tools that exist, and then also looking toward those new areas where we may not have policy or guidance in terms of how these capabilities should be built and created going forward. Now, for a crowd focused on information security and auditability, we are excited that our framework is in version 1. This is available in version 1, and we're working in the background on taking in feedback from testing this framework. We do have a working group that continually has a review cycle, an overtime review cycle, to determine when this framework needs to be updated and modified. It is in an area of cybersecurity. And as we know, cybersecurity continues to move forward. And so we know that is a space that does not stop evolving. Now that we're in our version 1 for our framework, we are launching our Voilà Verified Pan-Canadian Trust Framework Verification Program. The verification program is a third-party conformity assessment program that will through our program, under our umbrella, we will accredit information security auditors, accredited assessors. We will accredit testing laboratories who will be able to actually test the code or overlay different tests onto a technological solution via a sandbox or other methodologies. We'll accredit readiness advisors as well, who will be able to help organizations through the process with independence, separate from the information security auditors, to help them to prepare for audits and to learn through the process. Now, what we are verifying, what the accredited assessors, the accredited information security auditors are verifying, is verified services and verified networks. And so these can be solutions, these can be wallets, these can be capabilities, these can also be networks. And so we're looking at how to apply information security verification across those different kinds of networks, those different kinds of scenarios. So I think it's a very interesting space to be working in as the space is evolving from a digital identity perspective. Once our accredited assessors provide a report that an organization has been verified, there is a quality assurance process, and that will go into a public registry. And this public registry will be at first human readable, and then developed into machine readable tools that will enable a trust mark that will be issued to a approved service, a verified service or network that can be verified both by reading the website, but also through technological means as well. So what is the value of a third-party conformity assessment program? Well, third-party conformity assessment programs like the Pan-Canadian Trust Framework and the verifying the requirements for assurance against it do create marketplace signals that help to verify that a service should be more secure and more trusted, that risk is being mitigated. They provide brand differentiation for organizations that they have gone through this process, and so their tools are operating at a high level of security, a high level of confidence. They contribute to the safety and the soundness of the digital economy while fostering operational interoperability, particularly when we might have different technologies and different types of solution all within one ecosystem. And they contribute to user-centric control and protection of personal data. So that's just a handful of the values of this type of a program. We do have an application process, and we do have with us a international compliance expert who is leading our program. Her name is Ruth Puente. If you are interested to learn more about the program and the specific details, Ruth Puente will be happy to meet with you and go through the cross references between what we're doing and ISO or SOC 2 audits or things of that nature. So Ruth is the lead of this program, and she will step you through, if you'd like to go through the program, the process. But beforehand, she'll answer any questions that you might have, take in any feedback you'd like to share. So where are we going? Well, the next things that we are working on are around mappings and mutual recognition. And so if you're being in the information security and digital identity space, one important tool, we talked about tools for trust and tools for verification and assurance, are mappings. And so we're working with our ecosystem on determining the high level mappings that need to be done to verify the overlap or the differences between our framework and others. We high in our list are, for example, in the US, the NIST 863.3 series. Our framework has more capabilities in it than the 863.3. So there will be some overlap, but we're also broader in scope. Another is around ISO 29115, also around the EIDAS regulation in Europe, the UK's Digital Identity and Attributes Trust Framework. So there are a number of frameworks out there, or a number of national standards where this can provide some overlapping mutual recognition. And so we want to make it clear where those alignments are and where the differences are from what we're working on. And so we're working to that effect. We are building in more pathways to overlay different cybersecurity tests and quality assurance tests into the space. So that is a space that will continue to evolve again as the ecosystem evolves, because we're not prescribing for a specific technology. We're prescribing a governance, risk, and compliance framework where you can overlay a specified test and bring a verification of a specified test to prove that part of the framework. And the group is working right now on how to design for, what does it mean to design for or build criteria for within this program for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so how is that accounted for from a component, a functionality perspective, for example, at the authentication layer. And then also once these tools are built in, that they're not excluding, whether that's they're not excluding persons from participating within the ecosystem for different diversity, equitability, and inclusion reasons. So we're working to design that in, and that will be an ongoing process as well as we move forward. Now, where are we today? We have already within the program ready for assessment our verified person component. So this is, how do you verify that Francois is Francois? This is the important information that goes into a credential that, for example, could go into a wallet in that model. We also have the privacy component ready for assessment, and we are next moving into the framework into the Voilà Verified program, the digital wallet component, and then also building in the infrastructure component in the end of 2022, and then loading in more components in a phased approach as we go. We didn't mention one thing that's in this list. So from the upcoming, you'll see the list of, we're rolling capabilities into this framework to be verified. The program itself, when a trust mark is awarded, it's a 3-year trust mark. There is a initial year audit between an organization and their information and their accredited assessor. Year 2 is half of the criteria surveillance audit. Year 3, half of the criteria surveillance audit. Year 4, the trust mark starts over again and a full assessment is done. So it is on a 3-year term, this program. And then one thing that we didn't notice what's in this list here today is around trust registries. We were also building in, I mentioned as I was looking at the overview of the Pan-Canadian Trust Framework Voilà Verified program, there will be a public registry. We're also building in against different risk profiles, what should be the outcomes of a trust registry, then noting that trust registries might be built on different technologies if that trust registry is operating for a self-sovereign identity network versus if that trust registry is operating for a trusted operator network. It may need to be built on different technologies, but it needs to have the same degree of confidence in the information that's provided through that trust registry. So I think we think that that's an important piece of the puzzle coming forward. Where are we now in the program as well? We do have a collaborative agreement with Prompt. If you know Prompt, Prompt is a funding agent, a funding organization that is based in Quebec and focused on enabling innovation and cybersecurity in the Quebec ecosystem. So organizations who are based in Quebec, operating in Quebec, can have an opportunity through Prompt to have up to 50% of their assessment costs reimbursed through the Prompt program. So if you are not familiar with Prompt, please go have a look at them. We think they're fantastic partners and are working with us in helping the adoption of this program. And we're also excited to see that the Pan-Canadian Trust Framework itself has been now referenced in the UK Digital Identity and Attributes Framework, where it's been referenced alongside NIST 863.3, the EIDAS European regulation. And so it's fantastic to see that our framework is now getting into a space where it's listed in the same ecosystem as those types of national and international standards in the space. It's a very exciting program. We are currently accrediting our first assessors. And so at this point, the applications are open for our membership. We are accrediting information security auditors. We will soon have a small number of information security auditors. We will start accepting applications for organizations who'd like to be verified service providers or network providers. And we will soon open those applications for both information security auditors and for service providers. We will soon open that up to the public more broadly. And we are continually engaging with stakeholders, with industry associations, with governments in terms both inside of Canada and outside of Canada, in terms of how this space evolves, how this framework evolves, and where it provides value and where that mutual recognition can be grown forward. So that's a little bit of an overview of the Pan-Canadian Trust Framework, what it is, the Voilà Verified program, how we are addressing governance, risk, and compliance for digital identity capabilities in very complex ecosystems where the standards and the technologies are many. We also talked about the scenario landscape, the different types of models that exist, and the likelihood that they're going to go forward at the same time. So we will have a continually, for a little while, a complex ecosystem. And then we talked about people's perspectives, what they think about digital identity. And when we think about people's perspectives on digital identity, it's both us as people, but also us in our capacity as decision makers, or us in our capacity as CIOs and CTOs in organizations, or who are working, building code in organizations who need to make decisions about digital identity. So the perspectives we find to be very interesting. That's built on 3 years of surveying coast to coast of Canada. And we'll have a new report next year of how the perceptions changed from 2021 to 2022. So we've always find a lot of insights through that research process. Now, if you'd like to learn more about the PCTF, dig into the details of it. If you'd like to learn more about the Voilà Verified program, we can schedule a session follow-up, and we can bring in Ruth Puente from our team. And we are a non-for-profit association. We are about 120 members who are from the public sector, the private sector, federal government, provincial government, municipal governments, as well as telecommunications providers, financial institutions, payment networks, credit networks, technology providers, information security auditors. We all have the one single mission, which is reducing uncertainty around digital adoption and digital identity to help it be adopted, to answer questions, and then to provide this risk management layer with our Pan-Canadian Trust Framework and continue to provide value both in terms of growing the education in the space and in terms of solving real problems with the Pan-Canadian Trust Framework as a tool. So I think that's our overview for today. We're happy if you have questions or if you'd like us to go back through any of the materials that that were shared today. We are making available to the conference organizers both slides in both English and French, so you can have both of those at your availability. And as you see from Francois, our team is bilingual as well. So if you you can connect with Francois and with I in the language of your preference, English and French as well. So yeah. Are there any questions or materials that the audience would like us to? We know this was created as a workshop. We know doing a workshop over Zoom it can be difficult, but we're here and happy to answer any questions or go into any topics more deeply that the audience might wish.
Joni and Francois, thank you so much. Yeah, for sharing your insights and perspectives on digital identity. A couple of questions, maybe. So what can we as individuals do to advance this whole discussion? And when somebody is in a conversation, where do we go if we're looking for insights? I think you talked about your own website, but where else or what else can we be doing?
Mm-hmm. I think you can look at, I think there are natural organizations in this space, like the Canadian Center for Cybersecurity does a lot of work related to cyber. We certainly have a lot of resources in the space. There are also many standards that are existing, and this is in, a lot of them are being built in the W3C, in the IETF, OpenID Foundation. So it can be quite a landscape of places to look. And when you're thinking about what you do in your kind of everyday life, where you look kind of depends on the question. And so I think, if it's what you can do personally, I think if it's an information security type crowd, maybe you can look a bit more at the framework. You can look at how your customers or your clients are, or your organizations are implementing identity. Do they realize that they're implementing digital identity? And because sometimes they don't. And are they doing so in a way that manages risk? There's also a lot of policy movements, and from another reason we're excited recently is because there has been a lot of progress in Quebec. So you may have been seeing both British Columbia, Quebec, and Ontario have all been collaborating toward implementation of digital wallets, and these are first steps for sure, but they're exciting steps. And so, Francois, do you want to talk a little bit about what's been happening in Quebec and what people can look at there?
Yeah, definitely. You need to track, Greg, what's going on from a bill perspective. So June 2021, Quebec signed off on Bill 95, which is a public bill that you can read online, who are basically asking all the ministères and the government to be more transparent about data management. Also, they signed off on what they call the Projet de loi 64, who became Bill 25, which is like GDPR in Europe. This is, again, public play. And recently, last January, they signed off on Bill 6, who was basically creating the Ministère de la Cybersécurité and du Numérique. This is like a premiere in Canada. And even today, when you're following what bills are, so today, there's also a new discussion about Bill C27 with the Ministère de l'Innovation with François-Philippe Champagne. So all those things are happening. Canada is so well positioned because actually, aligned with other jurisdictions in the world and also other standards, this is exactly where the industry is going. So the fundamental behind this is also, and we are, I think in Quebec, we are very privileged having Prompt, having le MEI supporting those initiatives to basically capture this new innovations from a policy perspective, but also drive digital transformation of the society. So as a tool, trying to figure it out, how do I track everything? So I suggest every people attending this sessions to log in on the LinkedIn web page of DIAC. We're using our LinkedIn page as a communication platform also, and follow us on Twitter. At least we'll give you a resume of what's going on, because because yes, it's difficult to track. There's something new each and every day, but I think we are very lucky to have like an overview of what's going on. And I think this, as my presentation, like we are fitting the right element of the puzzle to the right ecosystems, because this is not only about technology. This is not only about solutions. There's a mix of public and private. So I think you can use our LinkedIn platforms and Twitter platform just to track. You can also track me and even Joni, because we are enablers of those communications and actually trying to figure out what goes wrong or what should goes right. But I think with some perspective and some sense. But that's what we do. This is a very passionate moment, not even for us, but also for humanity in a way.
And if you're interested as well, just in the news yesterday is the Cullen Commission report. This is in British Columbia. There's a lot of there's some modeling around money laundering that was happening in British Columbia, and the government did a detailed investigation and report that was called the Cullen Commission report. It was published yesterday. We're going through the overviews now, but this was really around money laundering and real estate. And so, for example, if you think about where digital identity sits in terms of verifying your title or verifying your mortgage, there was a lot of crime that was happening in that space. And so where do you see these things turn up? And any place you need to verify information or do some sort of verified information or verified money transaction, this is where digital identity is showing up. I think Francois' suggestion, LinkedIn is a great place as well, where a lot of the conversation is happening.
And this Cullen Commission, Greg, is a very long process, because the report itself is more than 500 pages. But actually, from a money laundering perspective, all those investigations, because actually we saw that, so the BC government realized there's money to be missed, but also trying to catch up and to protect the citizens about it. So we use those elements to come in the market to basically educate stakeholders and decision makers. Greg, I also see a French question.
I couldn't do it justice.
I'm going to read it. I'm going to read it because I know exactly the answer. So for the audience, dans un monde parfait, est-ce qu'on possède un seul portefeuille avec tous nos identités numériques, ou plutôt des portefeuilles séparés pour nos identités personnelles, commerciales et ou gouvernementales? C'est une excellente question, parce que pour reprendre le concept simple d'un portefeuille, j'ai le mien comme je l'ai toujours utilisé, et dedans, je peux gérer mes informations comme je le désire. Je peux avoir une carte American Express, comme je peux avoir une carte de loyauté d'un autre programme, comme je peux avoir ma carte de débit bancaire ou même mon permis de conduire et ultimement mon assurance maladie. Ce qui est en train de se faire, c'est que les gouvernements sont en train de, si on veut, nettoyer leur système d'information, parce que nos gouvernements, ne serait-ce que Revenu Canada, Revenu Québec et les entités provinciales, ce sont eux qui sont capables de m'officialiser dans un système. Donc, d'un point de vue provincial, c'est clair que l'identité qu'ils gèrent en mon nom versus moi qui le désire, au niveau de mon statut social, marital, parent ou pas, assurance maladie, permis de conduire, il n'y a que l'État qui est capable de l'octroyer, et même le passeport là-dessus. Donc, d'un point de vue, si on veut centraliser, c'est eux qui vont être capables de faire ce qu'on appelle les verified credentials, vérifier et attester que j'existe. Parce que l'identité numérique, c'est autant la capacité d'identifier et d'identifier quelqu'un. Par la suite, leur rôle, c'est aussi de suggérer un portefeuille. Mais en même temps, je peux aussi avoir le mien, parce que d'un point de vue système d'information, je pourrais utiliser leurs informations qui vont rentrer dans mon portefeuille. Je garde quand même une notion de contrôle. Ce qui est très important, ce qui se passe en ce moment, c'est que oui, je pourrais utiliser un portefeuille qui m'est suggéré par défaut avec des services financiers sur mon téléphone mobile, dans un environnement Android parce que je suis sur un Samsung, mais pour d'autres, ils vont vouloir centraliser leurs services à travers un portefeuille qui va être offert par défaut par Apple. Et dans ce contexte-là, Apple peut même suggérer sur un iPhone son propre wallet, ce qui est très important. Le consommateur, l'usager, l'humain, l'individu, la personne, le citoyen, a aussi une notion de contrôle sur son information. L'idée, c'est comment le rendre accessible pour recevoir des bénéfices par rapport à ça. Fait que c'est une réponse un peu longue, mais cette transformation-là est tellement importante en ce moment que, pour l'instant, je pourrais utiliser plus d'un portefeuille parce que je peux avoir différents services qui sont octroyés par l'État ou encore par le secteur privé, mais à terme, on peut percevoir qu'il pourrait y avoir une synergie des informations, mais les informations, je pourrais le mettre dans mon portefeuille à moi. Fait qu'il faut être extrêmement averti. Et comme on le dit souvent, l'identité numérique, c'est plus qu'un login parce que moi, j'ai beaucoup plus d'enjeux sur un metaverse qui veut changer le monde, mais ultimement, c'est sûr que j'ai un bénéfice à faire partie d'un environnement social à la Facebook, avec la WhatsApp, des choses comme ça, mais qu'est-ce que je trade, donc, comme information? C'est une réponse un peu longue, mais il va y avoir au début plus d'un portefeuille parce que j'ai différents bénéfices à chacun des portefeuilles, mais les gouvernements vont aussi en suggérer un parce que ce sont seulement eux qui peuvent authentifier et identifier qui je suis versus ma banque. J'espère que ça a répondu à la question. I hope I answers well. but Greg, fundamentally, wallet become the ultimate deliverables, and wallet could contain so many information. We need to track the benefits that goes with those wallets.
Okay, well, I think we're going to be giving people some time back in their day. So thank you so much. And I think people are all looking forward to seeing the slides and trying to understand and drill down in some of the models and frameworks you shared with us today. So again, I just want to thank you so much, Francois and Joni, for sharing with us today. And this has been really helpful. And it's exciting, as you say, if we're leading the world, or at least we're being recognized as leaders in parts of the world, that's a good thing for all of us. So,
Greg, if I may, I think what is the real opportunity is digital identity is a transversal experience. What goes on after the digital infrastructure, the solutions, the wallet are so fundamental. So when we align from a vertical perspective, how do we operate things? Could be an autonomous vehicle or as citizens. This is the big dilemma. So we need to work all together, public-private, but digital identity is very transversal. So apply, and so after the question is which industries we are applying, it involves also connectivity, cybersecurity, and governance, and also accountability of services. That's the challenge also, because someone needs to be responsible one day.
And information security and information systems sit at the heart of this. So for this audience, it's a call to action that you are a part of the leaders that will help with the risk management and helping the space to move forward. And so we hope to work with you, and we need your leadership as well. Thanks.
So I'm sorry, we do have another question. How far away are we from having a PCTF certified wallet available for use? What's your
well,
that's a good one.
Good question.
Yeah, we are right now verifying or accrediting information security auditors. The wallet, what did my slide say? So I don't want to be like Elon Musk and put my team onto a schedule that they didn't know about. Yeah, so they're saying that the wallet itself goes into the program for verification at the end of 2022. So I would say that it's possible in the first quarter of 2023, you could start to see your first checkmark Pan-Canadian Trust Framework verified digital wallet.
Wow, that's exciting.
So we hope so too.
And Greg, just to add some more velocity in the discussions, there's another nonprofit organization in Quebec called Prompt, who basically finance through grants innovations through cybersecurity, AI, 5G, and also certification program. They basically support certification. Actually, in Quebec, via Prompt, who is financed by le MEI in Quebec, every enterprise or small, medium businesses who wants to be Voilà Verified compliant, Prompt will finance up to 50% of that certification process. This is also, again, unique in Quebec. So a little bit jealousy about outside Quebec, but actually this is what a program that exists. So Quebec would like to have other provinces do the same, but actually Quebec is doing it today. So it's a huge benefit for the ecosystems via DIAC.
Yeah, I know that Joni mentioned that in her talk, and I'm sure that got a lot of people thinking about how they're going to be able to take advantage of that as a support, I guess, or capability.
Totally.
That's right.
All right, well, in the absence of any further questions, I'm going to suggest we wrap the session, and thank you again so much. I think we're all a little further along in our thinking than we were an hour or so ago. So thank you so much, Joni and Francois, and keep up the good work, I guess, would be the message from the team. Thanks.
Thank you for the invitation. Thanks for joining us for the session. You'll get our slides in both languages in your package. And thanks, Greg, for hosting us. Thanks, Francois, as well. Thanks, everybody.